Recording. Okay, so welcome everybody, and Juan Felipe, welcome. The floor is yours. Let me share the screen. Share the screen.
Good morning.
Okay.
So I titled this article that it will pretty soon appear on the screen.
It's not yet. 1 second.
So it's coming.
But I don't know how to move it. 1 second. If I'm sharing, okay, I cannot move the paper. 1 second. Let me stop sharing. I don't know why. Nobody sees because it says here.
No,
Stop.
I cannot see it.
Okay. That's why I like to, okay, my screen is, 1 second.
Okay, can you stop to share the screen and I will share the
Yeah,
screen
but
here.
I cannot stop the screen. That's the problem. I am frozen okay, 1 second. I cannot do anything in my screen.
You can
Okay,
go down.
okay,
Yeah.
now,
Oh,
1
now,
second.
now you're sharing.
Okay, but 1 second, because then, okay, now I'm sharing. Okay, now, yeah, it was frozen. Okay, okay. So now
Can you
it's,
put it bigger? Maybe it's too small.
okay, okay, too
Yeah.
big.
Oh,
1 second. Like that
yeah.
is better.
It's okay for me, but I'm not sure that it's okay for everyone. So if you can put it even bigger, that's gonna be great. Okay. So let me start. What body at stake? I will begin with this quote from Freud in 1912 in the text called The Dynamics of Transference. It cannot be disputed that controlling the phenomena of transference present the psychoanalyst with the greatest difficulties. But it should not be forgotten that it is precisely they that do us the inestimable service of making the patient's hidden and forgotten erotic impulses immediate and manifest. For when all is said and done, it is impossible to destroy anyone in absentia or in effigie. That means in absence or an image. Good afternoon to everyone. I want to thank Initiative Toronto for this invitation, and especially I want to thank Ines Anderson for making possible this virtual encounter. Around 22 years ago, Jacques-Alain Miller was a special guest at Tribute in Los Angeles, California, whole of an event, in particularly because in 1999, we were at the USLA, and we were as a small group called Logos at that time. We were perhaps in a moment quite similar to the one that you guys are right now. A small group that started by Alicia Arenas in Miami that was beginning to make a work for psychoanalysis with a Lacanian orientation. After much work, we became one of the sites of the nascent Nueva Escuela Lacaniana, which is the school that combines certain cities and countries from South America and Central America. Years later, little by little, and having to give up the status of site of a school, we adhered to what is today the Lacanian Compass. We considered it was the moment to make the full bet on the existence of the Lacanian psychoanalysis in the US. I tell you this because not only at the clinical level, but also at the school level, especially, events and the production of events are of vital importance. Events require the presence of the body, a body that moves to meet other bodies with whom we share a common goal. In the horizon of this community, hopefully, not like Moshe's, I hope, is the American School of Lacanian Psychoanalysis. Maybe you are inaugurating something like that there, a place of permanence of psychoanalysis as a possible offer in the market for the treatment of the human suffering. Especially if we take in account Lacan's warning, psychoanalysis is not eternal. It has conditions to be able to exist in the civilization. Psychoanalysis as a practice can disappear. I have taken the text that Jacques Miller presented 21 years ago. I recall the trip in Los Angeles, California, entitled Paradigms of Usance. In my opinion, it constitutes a conceptual map of orientation in Lacan's work, especially in relation to the jouissance and therefore the body. This conference was given in Paris days later within the course of Jacques Miller in Paris in the year 1998 and 1999. This course has been published under the title of The Experience of the Real in the Psychoanalytic Cure, la experiencia de lo real en la clínica psicoanalítica, en la cura psicoanalítica. In addition, I have taken an additional class from this course that follows the paradigms of usance. This class is titled, unfortunately, it's not translated in English yet. We must translate it because it's essential. This class is titled The Primacy of the Practice. So it touches the core of the practice, of the psychoanalytical practice. In this course, in 1999, Jacques Miller already works on the analytical practice as a practice oriented by the real. It was kind of a slogan a long time ago. This class in particular caught my attention because it allowed us a rereading of the first five. There's some microphone open.
Yeah.
Can you close it? This class in particular caught my attention because it allowed us a rereading of the first five paradigms, starting with the sixth, which he called the non-report paradigm. This will be the main thread of our work today. I will pointing out in each paradigm the primacy of the sixth paradigm as highlighted by Jacques Miller in these classes. For Lacan, the body at the end of his teaching is reduced to a substance inhabited by the jouissance proper to the speaking being. The search for the concept of jouissance and its places opens up the possibility of locating the place of the body in each moment of Lacan's teaching. but it also allows us to think about our time, the most contemporary moment where we began to perceive the first post-pandemic effect, at least in the United States. During that pandemic, we made use of the technological tools that allow us to be virtually here today. We are using the Zoom. We serve ourselves, and perhaps we will continue to serve ourselves from it, not only for the work of the school, but also for the maintenance of our analytical practice. This summons us in some way to be able to formalize the effect of this practice through the use of these gadgets. Examine their effect, calculate their shortcoming, and especially differentiate the good uses from the symptomatic uses of virtuality. I thus tried to share with you a first approach to this problem, which is the state of my question. That's a very important part. It's just the state of my question. It is important to clarify that the paradigms are not chronological. They are superimposed on each other. They are taking primacy over the previous model, and they are overcoming the impasses and obstacles of the previous model. My opinion is that they carry the fundamental theme of the heterogeneity between the signifier and the jouissance, the body and the discourse, the body as a living substance, and the effects on the body of the entry into the language. This heterogeneity is formulated in many ways, as we'll see. Then let's take the first paradigm of jouissance. Paradigm 1, the imaginarization of jouissance. In this first paradigm, Miller places the first moment of Lacan work with respect to jouissance. Heir to the work of the mirror stage, this moment stands out for accounting for intersubjective relationship. So communication phenomena are the foreground. The function of the word is to be a producer of meaning. Therefore, the communication is marked by the asymmetry of places, the Hegelian dialectic, and the possibility of historical rereading of the life of the subject. It is what he calls developments of truth, in which are introduced by the so-called subjective rectifications. Today, we could formulate this as mutations of meaning jouissance. This relation is marked by this. The imaginary goes on the domain of the symbolic, where we can place the jouissance on the side of the imaginary. At this moment, two extremes fluctuate: the aspect of the word and the aspect of the language. We are witnessing a moment where the discernment of the unconscious is privileged, but Freud's economic point of view, which concerns the drives, leaves the imaginary aside. What is satisfaction at stake in this paradigm? Lacan Lacan places it at the level of communication. In communication, there is a liberation of meaning. Jouissance is about disfragment, disfragment. That symbolic disfragment that fits the subject for the sense it suffers. The symptom is a hidden meaning, not an obvious one. The symptom contains a repressed meaning. At this moment, the desire is the desire to be recognized, the desire for reconnection. So, in this paradigm, the libido has an imaginary status. The imaginary jouissance has as the joy in the front of the mirror image, touching the question of the imaginary self and the narcissistic joy. It is an infra-imaginary jouissance that separates the field of the self and the unconscious. That is why the imaginary axis makes an obstacle to the symbolic axis on his scheme L. Remember the scheme L, which is S, an arrow, A prime, and the other. Following this model is that Lacan examines DORA case in intervention on transference, that is in the CRI, in order to show the point of dialectical progress of the case due to the taking of own responsibility in the disorder that Dora denounced. Also, its point of out of the analysis due to the prejudices of Freud at that time. In the case of the President Schreber, for example, in Seminar 3, it is clear that it's in his analysis of Schreber memoirs, Lacan highlights the jouissance as an imaginary phenomena, but without the containment of the symbolic register. Let us remember Schreber in front of the mirror wearing feminine garments and suffering from the thought that inaugurates the source of his delusional elaboration. What it will be like to be a woman at the time of an intercourse. That was the thought. This model also allows an explanation, an explanatory model for the phenomenon of acting out in the case of Ernest Christ, Fresh Brains, because it shows a failure in the symbolic elaboration, expose and condense in a primordial oral element under the montage of an scene that is the emergency of an imaginary jouissance. So in this paradigm, we come across a jouissance on the side of the imaginary that is waiting to be ordered, a jouissance on the image of the body. Today is a jouissance that we can illustrate quite present in the use of social networks, such as TikTok, Snapchat, or Instagram. Read it from the sixth paradigm. We can say that it's based on a disjunction, this jouissance on the imaginary side, and its no relationship with the symbolic that make it possible to clarify the symbolic order in its autonomy, in its own syntax, dispersing with the reference to the jouissance of the body. Now we are going to the paradigm 2, the significantization of the jouissance. In this second paradigm, Miller highlights how there is a shift that goes from the imaginary to the symbolic. All the terms taken in the imaginary are now taken up in the symbolic. In this paradigm, the transfers belong to the symbolic register, as it is in Seminar 5th. The phenomena of the drive and the body are thought from the Freudian indication that takes the drive from its grammatical point of view. Drives are possible to produce a metonymy and symbolic displacement. They appear linked to the symbolic subject. So the drive and the grammatical aspect of the drive. The demand in its deceptive nature is the clearest example of how Lacan described the drive in symbolic terms. So you can read in the paper, just the writing of the demand, which is subject cross out, daimon, which is conjunction and disjunction, and demand. Another point where this transformation can be seen in the fundamental fantasy, or fantasy as we call it in English. And it is based on the thesis that there is no fundamental fantasy that is not an argument. Therefore, the fundamental fantasy appears as assimilable to the signifying chain. This allows its writing. As subject cross out, diamond, object A. That's the fundamental fantasy. In this paradigm, there is a possible connection between the symbolic and the liminal. The phallus takes a significant character, and it doesn't belong anymore to the imaginary register. That is why we could say that here happened the significantization of the imaginary jouissance. Within this coordinate, desire appears as a meaning of an unconscious chain whose vocabulary would be fed up by the drive. The desire is fulfilled it's fulfilled by means of the signification of jouissance. For example, taking this paradigm, it was possible to think a Schreber's case, taking into account the value of the attempted cure that the dissolution makes. Point already highlighted by Freud. So as the dissolution construction is part of the cure. It's part of the treatment. The imaginary jouissance is taken by the symbolic that organizes it. From the perspective of the sixth paradigm, the second paradigm changed direction. So it's no longer a disjunction. It's the reabsorption of jouissance in the symbolic. So again, we are fighting against the opposition. Giving certain autonomy to the imaginary. The imaginary terms are written in a symbolic terms. So it's a translation that Lacan makes all the time. The lower fee minus phi, the lower minus phi, for the capital phi. That is to say, the emergence of the mathema of the fundamental fantasy and that of the drive. The jouissance of the body is on the side of the fundamental fantasy as living jouissance, and desire is a dead desire. That's the second part. Now let's go to the paradigm 3, the impossible jouissance. It is a paradigm exposed in seminar 7, the ethics. The problem of the satisfaction of the drive is unresolved in the paradigm of the signification of jouissance. The introduction of das Ding illustrates that drive, instinctual satisfaction, is not in the register of the imaginary, nor in the register of the symbolic. It is in the register of the real. Therefore, the satisfaction of the drive escape the symbolizable, susceptible to symbolize. In this paradigm, there is a substitution of defense for repression. Repression belongs to the symbolic register, as Freud showed it. Now, what is repressed are the representations, not the effects. Freud, that's the thesis of Freud. Defense predates the symbolic operation of repression. That's the problem. Here, the obstacle to satisfaction is not the imaginary order, because of the beauty as an obstacle to access the thing, in the case of Antigona, or because of the symbolic law that prohibited. Here, the jouissance is outside the imaginary and symbolic system. The jouissance is on the side of the real as an empty place in the system. Lacan illustrated with the figure of the vase, borrowed from Heidegger. There is an inappropriateness of the jouissance. In this third paradigm, if the jouissance is located outside of the system, therefore, it is only attainable through the ways of transgression. The jouissance is linked to the horror, the discontinuity, the antinome between the jouissance and the signifier becomes more evident in this paradigm. The jouissance is opposed to pleasure because jouissance is real. In this paradigm, once again, the jouissance remains in a place outside of the symbolic, as well as in the first paradigm. Jouissance is not material that can be grasped by the symbolic. It cannot be processed by the windmills of the word. The notion that the unconscious is a structure as a language does not include this jouissance. This jouissance is impossible to say. It is outside of the symbolized. For this reason, Lacan introduced the symptom as what arises in that inherent barrier between the signifier and the jouissance. The symptom is the way in which the subject formulates that jouissance that is bad, quoting Eric Laurent. Reading this paradigm from the sixth one, one could say that this junction is reinstalled. The jouissance remain on the side of the thing that is external. It remains on the side of the other of the other. The other of the other. It is exactly what the other is missing, what the other lacks. The thing, das Ding, remains isolated from the symbolized. Paradigm 4, normal, or he called it also fragmented jouissance. It is the jouissance expressed in the object A, as it appears in Seminar 11. It is the pulsating expression of a partial object that comes and goes, and that pierces, making holes, the symbolic, make holes to the symbolic, pierces the symbolic. It had its place in the holes of the body. Here, the jouissance of the body is achievable without any transgression. The object is a condenser of that jouissance. For Miller, Lacan once again forces the separation between the signifier and the jouissance here. In this paradigm, he tries to build an articulation between, once again, tries to build an articulation between one field and the other one, using separation and alienation as binding operations of the signifiers, of the signifier and jouissance. Alienation is a significant operation, belongs to the logic of the signifier, where one element represents the other element. There is a signifier couple, thus a represented element is replaced by another element. Repression and substitution in play. The other side, you find on the other side, you find separation, where the function of the drive is manifested in the void of the subject. The lost object appears, the object A. There is an overlap of the structure of the subject to the dynamics of the jouissance. His description in this seminar of the unconscious as something pulsating, something that opens and closes, is an attempt to equalize, to bring the unconscious closer to the model of the homogeneous zone. At due respect, Miller says, to be able to present the operation of separation and the introduction of the object petit a as responded to the lack of a signifier, one must discreetly substitute the living body, the sexed body, for the subject. So subject come to replace. You can find that in the page 40 on the English version of Paradigms of Jouissance. This produces a distribution of jouissance of the body in different homogeneous zones. It is a jouissance located by the action of the signifier. It is as if the body, for a certain condition, serve as an accommodation between the drive and the unconscious, where the loss of the object is presented as a natural loss. The jouissance bearing object is styled in a topology outside to the inside of the whole. The object is obtained at the price of substituting the living being from the subject. If you think about it, this is a Zenon-style mathematical operation forcing using the concept of limited functions illustrated by the example of Achilles and the turtles. Perhaps this paradigm can be more on the side of the social medias like Twitter, and Reddit. Taking the sixth paradigm, as Miller says, the idea is to formulate the thing, that thing, in different elements of usance, formulated in the forms of the object A. Miller emphasizes that it is a bit ambiguous, since the object to embarrass, reproduce the thing, but on the other hand, it is united to the other. This reduction of the das thing in a different elements produce some sort of dosage of the thing, translating the object A into an attempt to signify jouissance. Later on, Miller will say that it's a semblance also. Paradigm fifth, discursive jouissance. This paradigm, jouissance is deducted from the signifier. Lacan indicates in Seminar 17 that there is a primitive relationship between knowledge, signifiers, and jouissance. The relation of the signifier to the jouissance is intrinsic. From the perspective of the discourses, the signifier represents a jouissance from another signifier. Quote Miller. Hence, the subject remains in equivalence to the jouissance. That is why Lacan emphasizes repetition as a repetition of jouissance. And the notion of design is defined as what represents something to someone. The use of sign, according to Peirce's formula, comes before as something that represents the subject and just not another signifier. In this formulation, something is isolated. The sign and apart, the subject. The sign and the subject. This movement allowed the introduction of another value of the signifier as an exception, the S1. Without matching, without referring to another signifier. It's an S1 isolated. This is how the subject shows an effect of the signifier, which lead to the fact that there is no subject in the real. Since the real is alien to the representation, it is the not integrated element that we have been pursuing and that indicate the absence of the body as a substance of jouissance. The signifier is mark of jouissance, no longer an emptying of the jouissance. The problem that opened this paradigm is the relation of S, grows out, diamond, and jouissance, the subject and the jouissance. Starting the positivization of jouissance explicit in the follow paradigm. It is not enough to introduce the signifier lack where the jouissance will be lashed in its form of object A. Why is not enough? Because the body as such, the sexed body, has not yet to be defined. This paradigm introduced the problem of the living body. That's the virtue of this paradigm. The living being in heterogeneity with the speaker, with the signifier and its effect. But it does not solve the impasse that this causes. We also come across the Freudian indication on culture and its discontent. Regarding the extension, I imagine that all of you remember, the extension of the body that technology offered us and its effects even in our bodies. Those objects, today objects of consumption, that are consumed and that consumes the life of the subject. In my view, much of the virtual is located in this paradigm. Our ears and eyes, some aspect of the memory even. I don't recall that much the phone numbers that I used to recall, for example, are extended in an unprecedented proportions. But we must not lose sight of the fact that this object produce an effect of lack of usance. It is common in our offices to see the devastating effect of the global view of the subject, more in the style of Facebook, in which the complaints because of the absence of likes or the continuous manifestation of the feeling of FOMO, fears of missing out, all these scenarios in which the subject confirms a lack of usance, a feeling of lack of usance. The German philosopher Jung-Chul Han has been working on this field. Taken from the sixth paradigm, the fifth paradigm introduced the presence of the object in the discourses, leaving a certain ambiguity at stake. Regarding this, Miller points out, this invention of Lacan called object A possesses the same elementary structure as the signifier and at the same time is of another substance. There is a signifying matter, but there is a substance of usance. So matter and substance. You can find out this quote in the Experience of the Real, page 268. Here, the signifier is cause and channel of usance, trying to deny the not relationship between the signifier and the usance. So far, we do have the first paradigm, disjunction between the subject, the symbolic and usance. The second paradigm, try to grasp again, to put them together. The third one is impossible usance, try to again establish the difference to the testing. In the fourth paradigm, there is still an intent to put them together through the object A, the semblance of the usance, the real. The discursive usance try to put them together also to make it operate as a signifier. Now we are going to the sixth paradigm. This paradigm is essential to the problem of the body because it redefines the limits of the structure, subjacent in Lacan's work. In the classes of 1999 seminary, Miller speaks of the seven paradigm, but is in the writing of the version, he includes the seventh paradigm in the sixth. We'll see how. Formulating this paradigm in terms of no report, speak of certain negativity of what there is not, and precisely the non-rapport is a deductible consequence of the one jouissance. There is jouissance. Then one of its implications will be the installation of the problem of the one jouissance. In this paradigm, the starting point of jouissance, regardless of the form it acquires or the mutation undergoes, begins from the existence of the jouissance. There is one jouissance. We could say that there is a satisfaction and jouissance mutations that emerge as the effect of the speaking to someone. But all these mutations are just versions of the one jouissance, a jouissance without the other. There is jouissance, and there is only jouissance because there is a body, a living body. In order to exercise the jouissance, we need a body. Psychoanalysis is a practice with living bodies that speak. I will share with you a quote from Lacan in his Seminar 20 that I think illustrates pretty well this notion. It goes, in order to situate my signifier before leaving today, I will ask you to consider what was inscribed in the beginning of my first sentence last time. Enjoying a body. Enjoying is a very bad translation, as you notice. Jouir d'un corps. A body that symbolizes the other, as it perhaps involves something that can help us focus on another form of substance, enjoying substance, la substance de jouissance. Isn't it that precisely what psychoanalytic experience presupposes? The substance of the body on the condition that is defined only as a which enjoy itself, séduit. That enjoy, that jouir, exercise the joy. That is no doubt a property of the living body. But we don't know what it means to be alive except for the following fact, that a body is something that enjoys itself. Cela se jouit. That's Lacan Seminar, page 23, Seminar 20. So here we are in the presence of the regime of jouissance, which open up to the so-called last teaching of Lacan. The thesis of this moment, the underlying thesis, is that all material jouissance is one jouissance. We always enjoy our own body. One of the purposes is to remove the place of the jouissance from any Platonic shadow. Not at the level of the idea, not at the level of the representation, and so on and so on. Miller illustrates this with the addictive drug use, the use of the drugs, but also with the work, with the TV, with the media, and so on. We can update the example with the different platforms of social media in which the, which end up being located in the body itself. Even the phallic joussins, look at that. Lacan insists on presenting the phallic joussins as another version of the one joussins, having in mind the concentration of joussins in the phallic part of the body. In fact, he defined the phallic joussins as the idiot joussins, the joussins of the idiot, because it does not make any link, any bond whatsoever. Similarly, the word. There is a jouissance of the word that does not attempt or seek communication. Miller put it in this way. The place of the jouissance is always the same, and the body can enjoy masturbating or simply talking. To speak, this body is not linked to the other. It is only linked to his own jouissance, to its one jouissance. That's in La Experiencia de lo Real, page 273, the experience of the real. And there is more. What about sublimation? In the past, sublimation was an operation that reached the other, similar 7. It was directed toward to the satisfaction of the other. The heightened unfinished destiny of the drive in Freud works. Remember, Freud promised when he take care of the drive, the definition of the drives, he promised to say more about the sublimation. Never happens. But in his seminar, in seminar 20, sublimation does not involve the other. It is the art of the satisfaction of the solitary word. This journey throughout the different moments of the notion of jouissance and the status of the body in Lacan's teaching allow us that the setback indicate precisely this topological dynamic. That is why I mentioned at the beginning that the paradigms are not chronological. They are forms of jouissance that overlap with each other, a model that takes precedence over the previous model, and they overcome the impasses and the obstacles of the previous model, showing precisely that heterogeneity of the signifier and the jouissance. But this has to be inscribed in a body. Now we have said that events require the presence of the body, and those bodies are touched by, marked by, and constituted as such due to the heterogeneity between the signifier and the jouissance. This impasse is shown in a different way, and virtuality you hear me now. Now, we have said that the event required the presence of the body, and those bodies are touched by, marked by, and constitute as such due to the heterogeneity between the signifier and the jouissance. This impasse is shown in different ways, and virtuality does not escape this dynamic, especially in this moment of transition to post-COVID time in the US, and how is presented in the clinic the stumbling block inherent to the virtual as a mean of connection, but not of bonds or even less of ties. In psychoanalysis, if psychoanalysis offers a possible treatment to the human suffering, we must ask ourselves about the implication of the virtuality in our practice, in our bond to the school also. In the clinic, for example, some of the analysants who resume their analysis in person after having sustained the analysis in a virtual fashion express the anguish at the approach of the place of the session, the extraneousness when resuming the preparations for which the body has to go through public places, the value of the travel time before and after the session, the report to be thinking, elaborating, and so on and so on. They express the difficulty that the screen caused them by containing their own image all the time, and 1,000 other phenomena that we will be giving an account on this. Many of them perceive that it is not the same, a virtual session as a face-to-face session. On the analyst side, certain virtual maneuvers fulfill the task, such as disappearing from the screen or using the camera or pausing the video call, and many more. But there is also a clipping of the virtual medium. The microphone regulates the volume of the analyst's voice, the image of one's own face in the screen, the cut caused by the internet glitches, and so on. I venture to say that the satisfaction at stake in the virtual exchange is a way of trying to bail the one's usance. The body behind the screen opposes the presence of the jouissant substance moving to the place of the ritual of the session. Or also, why not, to the routine of the session. Miller calls it routine as opposed to invention. The analytical session is always between them, routine and invention. Lacan once says that the analyst is a symptom with TH. At the place of the symptom, the analyst will enact a body event, a semblance of trauma. This is well illustrated by Annelise in her article that is translated in English in Lacanian Review 9, What Word, What Body? Published at the Lacanian Review. So she opened up the question as follows. If we analyze the speaking body and aim to the real of the symptom with TH, which is an event of the body, which precisely resists all decipher, what interpretative practice is there is not to invent that will live up to this real interpretation event, vociferation, ejaculation, sideration, putting one's body into it, provoking a gut reaction in the body. These are some of the terms relating to this post-interpretative practice, as Akala Miller called it. And they delineate an area where the body is involved. She brings some examples that I want to share with you about it. Allow me then to take two of them. First, she said, I begin with the interpretation without words, presented by Monique Kusknenier in her past, her testimony of past. After the end of the session, in a dark hallway leading to the door, she's forced to turn around because she hears a noise, a kind of groan. She sees her analyst making the gesture of a ferocious beast ready to throw himself on his prey. It is a devouring pantomime. So the analyst in the hall, dark hall, very common in France, make a pantomime, like a prey going behind the, like a beast going behind the prey. This past testimony is taken by Miller to distinguish the interpretation as deciphering and the interpretation as disturbance of the defense. That's the paradigm that we took. The second example that Annalise brings us, in the case of Suzanne Hummel, that is published. She tells him, Lacan, that she wakes up every day at 5 a.m. That this was the time at which the Gestapo came to pick up the Jews. Lacan shot up like an arrow, came to her, and gave her an extremely gentle caress on the cheek. I understood Gestapo, gesture to skin, she said. A surprising gesture, extremely tender, that did not diminish the pain, but did something else. I still have it on my cheek, he said. 40 years later. It is also a call for humanity, something like that. So we have verified through these two examples the incidence of the analyst on the defense and not only on the repression, touching something of the jouissance of the body at the end of the analysis. So now we can ask ourselves, does this type of transference phenomena, an intervention and so on, only appears at the end of the analysis? Is this something proper only of the end of the analysis? So to answer this question, I'm going to evoke a case from my practice that I presented more than 10 years ago at the Miami site. I presented the case in a seminar that at that time Bernardino Horn, our colleague from Brazil, gave us. At that time, the focus of my case fell on the analysis of the symbolic axon. But in the construction of this article, I can say something else. Introduce a new perspective that clarified this case to me. It was an analyzand, quite taken by the mother. It depended notoriously and in many respects on his mother. He was very much under the influence of the female superego. After unexpectedly going to consult his mother analyst, trying to change the analyst, letting out a silent anger, he decided to go back to me and tell me everything that happened. In this session, after they're acting out, in this session, he tells me about the events. But he goes by the elaboration of what was an acting out. Within the elaboration, the analysand tells something that he kept silent. The great and heavy suspicion of the part of the analyst, suspicion on his part that the analyst was a cocaine consumer. This was his unconfessed fantasy. To take this aspect at that time, I focused on the analysis elaboration that revolved around my nationality, the memory of the school, the association that brings him to the memory of a schoolmate who was his nightmare during school years, and so on and so on. The father, the mother. I will not enter into this elaboration that I have their value in aspect of significations and meaning. What was the detail that allowed such a development of the meaning? During this time in which he worked on his tortuous dependence on his mother, he got a job that allows him to gain certain economic independence. And the hours for the session became impossible for him. He cannot find an hour to come. He only presents some very stream hours possible. So he only had the option and a very early schedule. In Miami, early schedule is 7 or 8. At that time, I think it was 7. I'm not sure anymore, but 7 at the morning. The practicing analyst accepted that schedule. Given the early hour, my morning soft and subtle rhinitis was present in the session with a snip sound occasionally, a sniff occasionally. A subtle sound produced by my nose, inhaling an additional amount of air. The effect of this sound echoed in the body of the analysand and disturbed his defense. His own suffocation with the mother was touched in the early moment, suffocation with the other, producing the effect already described. My sniff sound made not specifically of one of the forms of the object A. It was not a gaze, when the voice is not in certain whole of the body, but in the body as a substance of nuisance. His return after acting out opened up the silent negative transference that was present, unleashing multiple avenues of elaborations. But the element that unleashed this work of symbolic restitution lay more in the register of the defense than in the register of the repression. The defense was inadvertently disturbed. It was quite a surprise for the analysand, who came across large amounts of affection in his body, and a surprise for the practicing analyst, who inadvertently stumbled across with the acting out, and who, thanks to the transfer tie, allowed a later elaboration by the symbolic, and the passage to another moment of the analytic process, a squenching between the two moments of the analysis. So the essential element of this episode does not lie in the later elaboration of the meaning to the sniff, in which I emphasize in my exposition of the case at that time, 10 years or more than 10 years ago. Although they have a value through the symbolic way, they are not the divine detail. The involuntary sniff of the analyst in this case took on unexpected value of an intervention. Intervention, I don't call it interpretation, it's more on the side of this post interpretation, which echoed the analysand's body, echoed in his substance of jouissance. Therefore, throughout the work of the elaboration and mutation of jouissance was caused. This type of phenomena is framed more in the field of the sixth paradigm, but not without having cause effect on the other forms of presentation of jouissance, the ones detailed in the other five paradigms. This type of phenomenon is not possible without the presence of the two bodies, the body of the analyst, the body of the analysand. At the best, virtually offers bits of voice and image that do not define this version of the body defined as a substance of jouissance. Virtually is more alien to these contingencies that favor the maintenance of the access of the routine, as the Lacanian call it, to the detriment of the access of invention, using Miller terms. No? In his book, The Disappearance of the Rituals, a Topology of the Present, the philosopher Jun-Chul Han exposes the importance of rituals, which involve the presence of the body. He says rituals are symbolic actions. They transmit and they represent those values in order that keep community together. They create a community without communication. While what predominates today is communication without community, where the intensity of the togetherness in silent recognition provide structure and meaning. The binding nature of the rituals that requires the body differs from the exchange of data that do not create any social bond. Being connected is not being bonded or tied. The setbacks show precisely this topological dynamic. That is why I mentioned at the beginning that the paradigms are not chronological. They are forms of jouissance that overlap with each other. A model that makes precedent of the previous model, and they overcome the impasses and the obstacles of the previous model, showing precisely that the heterogeneity of the signifier and the jouissance, but this has to be inscribed in a body. Thank you.
Thank you, Juan Felipe. Amazing. So now we give the word or the floor to the participants. You can ask, put your questions on the chat, or you can unmute yourself. You can raise the hand. Also, I think if you've seen the reactions, there is a little smile like in my Zoom. You can raise your hand, or you can make comments on the chat. I can start making a question. The first that I thought it was amazing how you were using the sixth paradigm, no, in each of the paradigms. So I had one question.
Oh yeah, Inés, I was trying to think the first fifth paradigms with with the conclusions of the latest teaching of Lacan, and try to think what is just starting to be a phenomena, which is what is happening in our offices now.
Mm.
Not only the complaint of okay, the virtuality is not the same, and so on, but some cases that start to be very very comfortable
Mm.
with the virtuality, and is a task for the analyst to think, well, how to deal with that, how maneuver,
Mm.
requiring the presence of the body again. I'm not saying that certain maintenance or certain part of the analysis can be effective through the virtuality, but the core of the psychoanalysis, if we take in account this last paradigm, is missing. It's kind of missing,
Yeah.
as I tried to prove in the in the case.
Yeah. Because, well, my experience has been that the analysan body is here, like in the side, like we are a speaking being, no, in the side of the virtual connection, no. So we are here, our body is here with us, even if we're in analysis in a session. But also my experience is that, for instance, of course, that the sniff, no, that the sound of your noise was in the real. But I have had the experience that even the some things of the analyst, no, in a session, my experience, for instance, some the light or the lack of light has affected me, like has. So suppose that you were doing this virtual with this person, and then every morning you say, maybe that sound, you don't know until that happened. You see, I think that our experiences are so unique. Of course, I'm not saying that is the same. Of course, that body with body, face to face will never be as virtual. But in my experience, has been really that there is analysis. Like they can be, like they can have an effect for, because if every morning, for instance, you come, maybe that sound that could have that effect. We don't know. That could happen again to see if that happens. No, but I don't know if anybody want to. I had this in the first paradigm when I read the reading of the sixth paradigm. The question that it is that if the imaginary body with the imaginary body, do we try to make the sexual relationship exist? I don't know. That was the first thing, because here you say that the non-relationship, the separation between the usance of the imaginary side and the non-relationship with the symbolic, no? So here you can see the separation, no? That there is no relationship.
Let's call it certain exteriority.
Mm-hmm.
It was an element that was exterior to the symbolic, and that's the part that's more interesting of that starting point of Lacan. He was a very influenced by his work on the mirror stage. No,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
yes,
Yeah, yeah.
but I'm thinking, for example, in the school itself. No, on. Oh, you have a question? Go ahead, Isolde.
I have a question. Hi, Ines. Thank you
Hi,
very much.
hi, Isolda.
But I do have a question for Juan Felipe and for anyone that would like to, add up something on this matter. Uh, at the level of the school, I was thinking, have you thought about any effect that this might cause? Because in the school, there's also the experience of the school. So even though we can serve ourselves for this gadget and the internet and yes, we love it and whatever, but it's not the same to the presence of the body at the moment of presentation, for example. And what causes in the experience of each one of us in the school is a quite singular experience. The presence in that time and space and move to it on contrast or with contrast or in contrast with the experience that we also have, like the one that we're having right now. But there seems to be, if I'm following your presentation, something missing in the virtuality. So have you thought of effects might be caused in the school, but at the level of each site. Because right now, something that caught my attention, though, during the pandemic, even though it was a huge real for all of us, right, in our own singularity, we have a proliferation of text and productions and elaborations and stuff all over the web, all over, the internet. And you have people from England or people from Argentina or people from, and everybody come like together and exchanging their own perspectives and trying to elaborate about this real. But at the same time, my fear is up to what point this falls under the super ego mandate proper to this time. I mean, produce, elaborate more and more.
Numbers.
It doesn't matter where you are because you're going to have access anyway. You don't have to pay certain prices that we pay when we move to other locations. So I don't know if you have something to say about that.
Well, of course, there are certain economical point of view that is very important. We have certain budget of video, and we put that video in certain enterprises.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that the virtuality allow us to have during the pandemic an increase of all worldwide activities of psychoanalysis. But I'm thinking at the level of the local. Let's say our site in Miami, for example, we pay an office, we pay a space, a physical space, and we meet there and we read there and is now we're meeting. We sustain. We keep paying the rent of that space. I was one of the defenders of that position because now that we are retaking the normality of the new normality, is we have to meet there. And why? I don't know. Some of you maybe have the experience already to went to one of the events that usually you went in person and now you are going in virtually. For example, have the experience to connect to the École de la Cause Freudienne Journée. What is missing? I said, I didn't like it. Personally, I liked the content. I liked the conferences. I liked the testimonies, everything. But I didn't like it. I didn't like it because the missing part was the erotical ingredient that is hiding in the psychoanalytic discourse. I'm using the terms of Jacques-Alain Miller in the erotica of the time. That in reality, a certain movement of the libido around the conversations in the halls, for example, with colleagues that you know, with colleagues that you don't see for years, that colleagues that you don't know, you hear different experiences and questions and something is really happening at the level of the ritual, if you want, of the content of those parties. Certain erotical is playing at stake there that is missing in the virtual encounter, the virtual connection, we call it. Even by listening to some testimonies, usually the testimony have the effect to touch your own consideration of your own analysis, the moment of your analysis, make you think in many aspects of your analysis that you probably are not thinking yet. So sometimes produce anguish, division,
body events can produce
body events all over. That part is missing.
But you see, Juan Felipe, I don't know, for me, maybe because my own experience, I was 10 years in Venezuela and my life was the school. The school I went, like it was the site, the body, the hugs, like it was my life. When I came to Canada in 2000, I didn't have the school. I had nothing. So every time I went to Medellin, for instance, I went to see people, to meet, to go to the school, or to Miami, I went to the school. But here in Toronto, I didn't have any school. I didn't have hope. So since the pandemic, it's amazing, like in 2018 it started Initiative Toronto and we have a small group. I know, but for instance, being able to attend to the London, the summer that we had this amazing seminar in the London Society, I connected with people from Israel, and we did a cartel, an amazing cartel. And since then, is where I have felt the school more alive than ever. For me, I think that is so subjective and so singular the experience. For me, I have seen, I have virtually some testimony of AE that has made me a body event. So you see, I think that is very particular. I think that after we'll
Well,
see.
no, of course, it's very
So of
particular.
course something is missing. Always something will be missing. But I think that it has a very an amazing value. So I think it's very particular for each person, their own experience.
One of the difficulties that I found is so far we are in this moment and in a certain phenomenon of atomization of the transferences. The transference is the capital of one site of one school. If you live in Miami, you work for Miami, you're creating the necessary conditions to the psychoanalysis to grow up, to expand, and to be an offer for the suffering, as I said, for the human suffering in your locality. But you are dispersed because you are all over the place. That sensation that you're all over the place. So, yeah, probably you have to, as I said, it's a question, it's an open question.
Yeah.
I find out that that part of my thesis is that that part that you cannot reduce of the body, the jouissance of the body, is missing. It's missing in the virtual session, is missing in the virtual activities, and it becomes the core of the Lacanian orientation.
Yeah.
And that's
I
my
don't know
concern.
if that has to do in the paradigm 5, the discursive jouissance. I had this question because I the signifier represents a jouissance for another signifier, where Miller, well, I think Lacan is the one that the subject remains in equivalence to the jouissance. Wow, that it's amazing. That is amazing that the subject is equivalent to jouissance, and that's why Lacan emphasizes repetition as repetition of jouissance and the notion of design. So I don't know, maybe this has to do with the virtual, because if in the virtually there are signifiers, no? We are listening, but then the subject that here in this jouissance is equivalent to jouissance, the subject. So because that's substance, no? I understand that the jouissance introduces the substance. So I don't know. Mhm.
What I found amazing about these paradigms is that if you notice, it put the dilemma of the body and the signifier that was present even in Freud. Remember, he said, "Oh, the drive is finally my mythology, the scientific mythology that I create." And it was always a problem. So the first, the third, and the sixth tried to deal with the separation of the jouissance and the body. And the mystery was, at the beginning, we thought that the signifier will take in certain way civilize order, put order on the jouissance. Now we know every time that Lacan advanced, he advanced and advanced and advanced. And that was the issue in the seminar 17, because the discourse is a symbolic operation, belongs to the field of the symbolic, not only, but mainly. That means that he noticed that the jouissance at stake, it was not possible to grasp. That was, he was looking at a discourse that it was not assemblant. So he stopped that enterprise there and go from the other direction in seminar 20, from the perspective of the other jouissance. He took the feminine jouissance as a paradigm, but trying to face the problem of the core of the jouissance that make no link, bond, it's escape to the discourse. So how to deal with that? How to with an instrument that refuse the symbolic, that refuse to be grasped by the symbolic, how to do with that? And that's finally the last teaching of Lacan, no? The enterprise that he achieved.
Yeah. But have you been already on the site? You know, have you met already, like in the States, everybody's like back to normal, the new normal?
Not yet, but we will. We were having a conversation about it when we're going to come back. When we put a date, I'm not sure. Yes, we're going to meet again. We're going to put our bodies when we put our desire.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, yeah. So, Andrea, okay. Can you
And
unmute yourself?
Alicia,
Andrea has a question.
Andrea and Alicia.
And Alicia, okay.
Thank you so much, Juan Felipe, for your presentation. I guess my question is related to the clinical case. I really like this sniffing part, and I'm wondering if you could explore a little bit the sniffing, if there was any association from the part of the analysand with the fantasy of the analyst being a cocaine user or whatever. And if you could say a little bit about that. And also the second part, if you could try to, maybe I missed something, but I just would like to relate to the jouissance and the paradigm. Like if you could say something more about jouissance and this part of the case, this or the transference, I don't know. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, let me see. Yeah, I do not enter into that aspect because it was not the aspect that I want to highlight in the case. Because I want to, as I said, I want to take this divine detail, the special detail of them that I finally understood. And acting out is something that drive our, for Lacanians, drive our attention. So at that moment, yes, it was full of association later on. I mean, cocaine because I was Colombian, cocaine because then appears the memory of this schoolmate that bully him a lot and caused his unhappiness for a long period of time. And finally, the father. That appears, start to appear in his elaborations, associations, and so on and so on. Yeah, it was a moment. It was a moment that, but I asked myself always, it was nothing that I said in the session before, the acting out, was enough element to explain what happened later on. It was, let me put it this way, and I said, it was unexpected for him and it was unexpected for me. And that's one of the definition of the real. It's the merge. The analyst not must be prepared, but the analysts have to take in account that the real emerge in the analytical work. It takes different forms, different shades, sometimes do not take form, as in this case. And then we have a second chance if after that, for example, we can think in the COVID as an unreal that hit us as a planet. Mm-hmm. What is going to be, what are we going to do with this real is a work in progress. It's an elaboration that everybody's doing in this moment. I noticed today that in Toronto, maybe they are not in the same time that we are here in the US. because the vaccination has been massive. So we are starting to work in our offices. We are going without masks in many places now. And we are kind of evaluating the damage of the real, and at the meantime learning from the different answers that people create or did by the points that the subjectivity was touched by this phenomena and the things that they were forced to do by the phenomena. For example, I'm thinking in two patients that they decide in a very friendly way after sharing a lot of time, extra time, more than usual, because they used to be 1 week out, 1 week or 2 weeks out by month. But with her partner or his partner, they decide to get divorced. This marriage is always the question, how long there was a fail in those marriages, as any marriage, but there was a, maybe, yeah, but this was like an accelerating certain process. So in two cases, I'm thinking now in two cases that the fact that they were forced to live together, to share together in space for that long period of time, they decide very friendly after fight, but very friendly when they both of them were agreed that they cannot live anymore together. Because the equilibrium that they had before, but the symbolic, it was feeding the illusion that works. Yeah, Alicia.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Andrea.
Thank you, Juan Felipe, for this talk. Very, very interesting the way you put the paradigms of your sons. But I was thinking on that particular point of the virtuality that you referred to, and what it has to do, or what it makes with contingency.
Mm-hmm.
Because of course there is contingency in virtuality. There are the glitches, as you said. Sometimes, you know, the signal just leaves. And those are also contingencies, but it's, you know, everyone can interpret that in different ways, but I think it is a third party. The virtuality, the technical thing is a third party between the analyst and the analysand. So the place of the analyst, the place as an object, the place as the other symbolic, etc., is affected by virtuality in a way that, well, maybe we have to understand that better. But I think that it particularly affects contingency, the way contingency works with virtuality. I don't know, you made me think about that. I wanted to ask you if you have any other, you know, idea about that, particularly what virtuality does to the place of the analyst. Because with the sniff, it was very clear that it was in the place of the analyst, coming from there. No?
Yeah, Alicia, I'm agreeing. You were comment something?
Well, but following Alicia's comment, because Alicia, you made me remind something that happened last week with a patient. She started virtually, right? She's in Miami. She started virtually. She's working quite heavy in analysis, blah, blah, blah. But then because of what she's working, I told her, well, I'm starting in the office. Come to the office. Let's, plan the schedule, your work, whatever, but come, person to person. So she said, yes, of course, I'll go, blah, blah, blah. But when she came to the session, something comes up in this, if I'm following Alicia, your comment and your comment, Juan Felipe, something comes up about the position of the analyst in transference that wasn't there before in virtuality. What is the comment? The comment is this one. She's quite intense about the analysis, so she's doing analysis 3 times per week, okay? Yes, quite something. Wow. Yeah. So this time she came and says, Isolda, I was so anguished driving to here. I was so nervous coming here. It's like I was dressing for a first date.
How interesting.
You see? So, yeah. and the second time that she came, it was the same. Like, Isolda, I'm still with this nervous that it takes my entire body. I'm so anguished. I didn't know what to wear. I didn't know how to, put my hair. It's like a date. I'm coming here like I'm having a date. So it just make me remind me, because this aspect of the transference, it was a transference there already, but it wasn't present at the moment of virtuality as it was when we encountered face to face. And she was one of the patients that has told me, like, it's different. It's different when I have you in front of me. And she insists, it's like a date, but that signifier is something new. Just a comment alongside what you were saying and what Alicia brought up right now.
No, Alicia, I'm agree. Remember, we went to this seminar like 21 years ago. I recall.
Oh, yes, to Los Angeles.
And
yes.
I remember that Jacqueline Miller was skeptical about that. We were more enthusiastic. We think that we will see certain effect in the American community because of that event. And in certain terms, it was not a Caracas event. Have not too much consequences.
No, not at that time.
Well, the consequences were the consequences that we create later on. We as a community now talking about the Lacanian Compass. So not each event, it's true, not each event creates, is in that sense an event, and before and after, something that changed. But what is important, or what I try to highlight, is not without a body, and defining the body as a substance of jouissance. That is irreducible. In virtuality cannot. Let me put it this way. I will be very crude. It's not the same to have sex through virtuality that have sex through the bodies, with the content of the body. So we analysts are in the task to formalize those differences. I found that the little one, but it's just a little one. It's my question that I bring today, at the state of my question. Maybe in 3 years, I will say, oh no, yes, the whole analysis is possible through virtuality, but I found out very difficult to arrive to that point. And even for the school, I'm concerned about the erotic of the school. As I said, the libido that we need to put in others that live in the same city, that deals with the same cultural issues, that live with the same difficulties, the same moment, the same presidency, the same political moment, and so on and so on and so on. Yeah. That the problem with the discourse is the discourse is not enough. You have the structure of the discourse, but that was the point of the attention of that investigation of Lacanian seminar 17 and 18. He started to explore, he changed the perspective totally. And he started to talk about speaking body, substance of good jouissance. Yeah. He started to talk about, forget about the subject, forget about the representation. He started to deal with what is escape to this instrument that is the discourse. The discourse was not enough. And I asked myself in this paper, is a phenomena only from the end of the analysis? I'm not sure. I'm sure, I believe that our reading today of the cases, that's why I bring this case, is totally different from 20 years ago when we start to work on the rotation for the real, or the latest teacher of Lacan, the two derniers enseignements, all those aspects that Lacan start to showing us. And it's not that the symbolic highway don't give us, and it's necessary to cross it, but it's not a good compass. Because, for example, today I can read the sniff, Andreina, I can read the sniff as the key element of that phenomena that happened 10 years ago. At that time, I was reading something different, more than 10 years ago. Bernardino was here in Miami a long time ago. That the sniff, that sound of the analyst, the patient lay down in the couch, and this sound that was occasional, it was enough to make echo. Where? Not in the level of the representation, not that you get the gaze was there, not that the sound and the voice was there, in the echo in his own suffocation.
Yeah, but Juan Felipe, what my experience or my theory is that it's very singular. You know, like you when you gave the example about the sex, there are people that has more sex virtually than with the others with the other body. So, you know, like, and there is no sexual relationship. There is no something that works for everybody. You know, so
Yeah, but it's one of the problems of our times. I don't know if you work with people between, let's say, 15 and 25. They have issues with the body. For example, the encounter of the bodies, they have issues, serious inhibitions, for example. It's a phenomenon that we start to find out all over the place.
Yeah.
So the price to put the body as a substance of usance, they don't want to pay that much. Had to define all the time with them because they say, oh, we are having a conversation. And she said, and I said, and she said, and I said. And it's not a conversation. It's a text message. It's a chat.
Yeah.
So one of the things that I learned is to ask them, wait. It's a chat? It's a call? Or it's a embodied conversation? Because the difference is huge. Second idea that comes to my mind, let's not forget that the relationship with the hysteria with the body, the occultation that the body in the hysteria. And this is a good trick, the virtuality, the times are good for it. Or think about the relationship between the obsessive, neurotic obsessive, and in the body. The difficulty that they also have in terms of to be like a head not connected with the body. That helps too. So if the time favorizes or give space to those symptomatic uses, we have to be very, very careful to not help that much. And I'm not saying that we cannot adequate to the times. As a matter of fact, we are very excellent readers. When I'm excellent reader of our time. When you read, for example, Chulhan, you in certain ways, you immediately are thinking all the time in Seminar 17 of Lacan.
Yeah.
But make no mistake, the dimension of the body as a substance, that's the promise of the post-humanistic ideology. That they will replace the body with a certain technical apparatus, and you're going to be mortal, and you're going to have a limitless communication, and so on and so on. What I try to highlight today is that the virtuality, in my clinic, what I heard, following Lacan also indication, is receive these pieces of body, which is the object A, the semblant of object A, through this gadget. It puts you in relation not with the plus, but the less. The object A is the lack of usance in the consumption, in the capitalistic discourse. So yeah, the subjective elaboration, we will see, but not always that a patient said, oh, I'm happy, or this virtuality is working with me, means that maybe he's hiding something. Psychoanalysis is not about have the people comfort. Comfort is suspicious always. because it's the denial of the dimension of the real. It's not that we want to anguish the patient, but the anguish, the real, will show up in showing different moments in different ways. So maybe it's too soon, but I just want to add to the discussion, because the discussion is all over the WIP. In the last NLS Congress, Tom, for example, raised up the question of the virtuality.
Yeah.
And we are thinking about it. And this is just one element of my reflection, of my question now. But we have to formalize it. It's not, we have to go from the anecdotal to the formalization of what we see, what we heard, what we experienced. No?
Yeah, I was thinking about the one, only one alone, no? The one you sense. So because the thing is that when you are in the virtual, no, in this side you exist, like you are the speaking being. You are in a body. You have this body. You're a speaking body. The thing is that how the connection with the other body, no, because the analyst or the other members of the cartel of any other person, um, is also, they are a speaking body, but the connection is the virtuality. There is no encounter, no, there is no real encounter, or the bodies are the one. So I think that was, I liked this. I think it was Jill. I don't remember. There is that he was remembering Eric Laurent, that was saying that, like, the beard is like a bridge, no, a bridge between two sides that we are remembering, like we are remembering the real encounter. Because I was thinking when you were saying that is true, when the baby is born, for instance, no, they need to be touched, like, and there is experiences that, and that for instance, when the baby is in the incubadora, how do you say, the incubator, they grow better if they are touched, no. So even the babies now, like, they are put in the seat, and then they are given the bottle without even carrying them, no. So that makes a difference if the baby doesn't receive, that touch, that embrace, no. So we are missing all those hugs, no, those hugs, though, that I think, that real contact. Of course, I don't want to deny that, no, that of course, this cannot be forever. This is a moment that we do with what we have, the best we can. But yeah, afterwards is when we will see the consequences, no.
It's good to hear what I don't work with children anymore, not little children. I used to work a lot. But it's good to hear what they say about this uh, virtual time, what they're gonna produce about it. Because yes, it's the dimension of the play that give us certain certain symbolic direction. But I want to know what happened with the other dimension that is very important in the work with the children, the psychoanalysis with children, which is the body, what the body offers to the analyst. And it's on a minor issue, it's on a minor detail.
Yeah.
Wow.
Well, anybody wants to one question? We already is two. Well, for us it's 2 p.m. already, 2 hours. But if somebody wants a comment or any question, very interesting, all this, the body. So maybe, yeah, Andrea, okay, maybe we can, yeah, it was really good. Thank you so much. And I will send to everybody the site to where it's going to be recorded. So thank you so much, Juan Felipe.
No, thank you. Thanks to you for give
Yeah.
us give me the opportunity to share my question
Yeah, yeah,
and the state of my product, my elaboration about
yeah. No, very
it.
interesting.
Yes,
I think we are going to continue working here in Initiative Toronto because we, like 2 seminars ago, we were studying or reviewing the 7 paradigms or the 6 paradigms.
great.
So now we have an additional to review. Yeah. So thank you everyone for being here and
Thank
all the best. Thank you. Bye. Thank you.